Here is Nida, a young man living in a luxurious apartment building. One evening, while sipping a glass of wine, suddenly something like an egg fell on his head. He didn't know what it was, but it had a face, so he decided to ignore it and go to sleep. The next morning, Nida started a new day feeling very refreshed. Just as he finished getting ready, he saw that the thing from last night was still there. The face wanted him to press a button on its back to release her. He reluctantly rolled it over and pressed the button, and suddenly a girl appeared right in front of him. She asked for clothes, but he thought she was being demanding, so she controlled and smashed his valuable and expensive belongings. She wasn't a kid, but Hina. He gave up and gave her clothes. He wanted her to help clean up this broken mess. He mentioned the value of the items, so she reluctantly used her psychic powers to clean everything up at once. But he complained again because she threw non-burnable items into the burnable trash. He realized she could eliminate him if she wanted to. He had to ask where she came from, but she couldn't say. When asked about her powers, she also couldn't say. He wanted her to leave, but she had nowhere to go. When he complained again, she was about to make his precious painting disappear, so he had to give in. That night, he had to feed Hina, dry her hair after bathing, and give her a place to sleep. Nida realized he was like a babysitter for Hina. The next morning, he had to take Nida shopping. She chose all expensive items, from stuffed animals to cups to clothes. She bought nearly $1,000,000 yen worth of Nida's money, and even eating at a high-end sushi restaurant cost at least $1 million. Looking at the news on TV, when they got home, Hina suddenly wanted to go to school. He was about to disagree when she threatened him again, so he promised to let her go to school but had to set rules. First, she wasn't allowed to use her powers recklessly to avoid people finding out. Hina, living in this new world, found it strange because this place didn't force her to go fight. She later fell asleep and threw away the stuffed animal, making Nida wonder why she had said earlier that she couldn't sleep without it. The next morning, Hina was taken to school and had to use the surname Nida. So when the teacher called for Nida, she thought they were calling for her guardian. Only when she remembered Nida's words did she realize. Nida at this time was at the boss's place. The boss was discussing territory matters and noticed Nida seemed lost in thought. He thought Nida was worried about business, but he was actually worried about Hina. At school, Hina slept straight from the first period until noon. Her classmate woke her up and wiped her drool. In the evening, Hina had practiced yoga and then was about to use her powers to get water when she remembered her promise to Nida. But when Nida got home, he saw she had made the whole house float. She had to use her powers or she would lose control, and she should have told him that earlier. Having the whole house wrecked left Nida in no mood to make dinner. He saw a business card and remembered that today the boss had asked him to find workers to build a hotel on the mountain. Because contractors couldn't sign contracts with the construction company, they asked him to find anyone, as long as they were cheap. So he decided to take Hina to the mountain and let her use her powers to lift the trees. She did quite well and even arranged them in piles and peeled the bark in one go. After finishing the job, he was about to leave when he suddenly heard that the boss had been shot. When he got back to meet the senior brother, Nida was scolded because the boss was in trouble while he was fooling around with Hina. The senior brother assigned Nida to deal with those who shot the boss. Nida had no choice but to take a gun and go. When he arrived, Nida knew his Yakuza life was over. Suddenly, Hina followed him, and she knew the people inside were enemies. She had been given orders to eliminate all enemies. She wanted Nida to give her orders, but he refused, making her realize he wasn't like other adults. She couldn't act without orders, but he refused to give her orders, so she really liked staying with Nida. She went into the enemy Yakuza gang by herself and threw all the guys inside out for Nida to see. She finally brought the boss out to Nida, and he was later praised by the senior brother for taking down the entire gang by himself. The senior brother decided to consider him the strongest in the gang. Nida decided to repay Hina. She wanted to eat fish eggs, so he took her out to eat. He didn't know where she came from and didn't want to know. but if she lived with him, she would be paid for her work. The next morning, while eating breakfast, Nida complained about a few things regarding the food. He felt that she was eating too much expensive food and being demanding. She bent his knife to threaten him. That evening, when Nida came out of the bath, he saw the ball that Hina had dropped, so he picked it up to examine it and got wrapped inside that iron egg. He asked Hina for help, but she refused and went to her room. He struggled from 11 p.m. to 5 a.m. and still couldn't escape. Hina only woke up then, and he had to beg her for help before he could make breakfast, so she reluctantly flipped him over and pressed the button. During this time, another superpowered girl had also been sent here, but she fell midway and was found by a racing gang. They wanted her to get out of the way, but she found them too noisy, so she boiled the entire gang and took their clothes. She came here to find Hina. The next morning, Nida heard about the incident where the entire racing gang was boiled last night. Hearing it was done by a girl, Nida suspected Hina, but clearly Hina was with him last night. He and his subordinates went out to eat and saw a girl wearing clothes from that racing gang. Nida felt an familiar uneasiness. He sat with her, but the girl finished eating and didn't pay, so Nida paid for her. After ordering noodles, Nida didn't eat but gave them to his subordinate, while he followed the girl from earlier. In the park, Nida was hiding behind that girl when she was confronted by members of last night's gang, so she flung them away. He didn't dare show his face, and when he heard she was looking for Hina, Nida thought, "Oh crap." That evening, Hina complained of hunger, while Nida didn't dare get involved with that other girl at all. In just a few days, that little girl had caused so many thefts and fights that people had to ask Nida's gang to intervene. He knew this might require involving Hina. He wondered if Hina had fallen in the city instead of his house. This city might have been in chaos, and perhaps he had saved this world once. He asked his subordinates to search for that blonde girl, who by now had remembered her task of finding Hina, but still didn't know where to start because she now needed to find food to survive. When he heard that someone had found her, Nida had his subordinates withdraw and let him handle it. Just as the blonde girl was about to go searching, Nida brought Hina to her. We learned that this girl's name is Anzu, and she was sent here to teach Hina a lesson. But Nida stopped both of them, fearing they would destroy the entire city. He wanted them to compete, and he used food to lure Hina into forcing Anzu to compete. They would play rock, paper, scissors, and pointing. Both were allowed to use their powers to force the other to look in the direction they pointed. Following Nida's signal, they stepped up and played rock, paper, scissors. Hina lost the first round, so Anzu pulled her face down, but Hina still didn't move her face. In the second round, Anzu still tried to make Hina look up but failed. So in the third round, Hina made Anzu turn to one side until her neck almost broke. Accepting defeat, Anzu took a handful of Hina's hair to take back and fake that Hina had died. Hina wanted Anzu to stay and play for a while so Anzu could understand how great this place was. So they both went to Nida's house to play games, eat food Nida cooked, and sleep together. Nida took the clothes to wash, and the next day, Anzu decided to leave and would not be able to see Hina again. Suddenly, while preparing to leave, Anzu noticed that her red ball had been soaked in water and no longer worked. Now she couldn't go back to Nida's place because she had already said goodbye to Hina, and once again, Anzu became homeless. Nida then started flirting with a bartender girl there, but she behaved differently than before because Hina was following him. He went to a nightclub to have fun, and some girls there told him about rumors that he had recently been less promiscuous because he had a daughter. People had heard about him spending millions of yen on his daughter, so they could see how much he loved her. Nida went home feeling depressed. He knew everything was because of Hina, so when she asked for food, he set out canned food and went to take a bath. His attitude was a bit rough, but Hina found the canned food quite tasty. He decided to be resolute from now on, so that night he went out to party. The following days were the same. He only left canned fish for Hina while he went out to party and have fun. Hina couldn't take it anymore and decided to follow him. No matter how far Nida ran, as soon as he reached the train station, he saw Hina there. He gave up on taking the train and left. The next day at school, Hina complained to her friend about Nida always going out lately and leaving her at home. So she and her friend decided to follow Nida. They followed him to a street full of temptations, and then Nida was attracted by food, causing them to lose sight of him. They went to the bartender's place to look, but neither she nor Nida were there. Hina left her friend and went to find the bartender. A customer came and thought Hina's friend was a new employee, and when he heard she didn't know how to make drinks, he showed her how. Meanwhile, Hina met the bartender who was returning from shopping. Nida also arrived and saw a different bartender, thinking he had entered the wrong bar. Hina's friend thought he was Nida's father, but he denied it. He saw that this customer seemed to have just won at horse racing, so he treated Nida to a round. Hina told the bartender about being left behind, and the bartender advised her to talk to Nida about it, saying how could he understand and indulge her if she didn't speak up. When they returned to the bar, they saw customers being served by Hina's friend. The customers all thought she was a new hire and had already taught her how to mix drinks. Hina told Nida directly that she wanted to go to bars with him too. Everyone agreed, so the whole group went to a bar. At the bar, everyone built a champagne tower. Nida had someone set it up and let Hina use her powers to pour the champagne down, since everyone was drunk anyway. Hina's friend didn't know why she was there, and her mother called demanding she come home immediately. The next morning, Nida woke up at home with a bill 3 times the amount he had spent buying things for Hina. Hina was happy and wanted to go again, but he reminded her that they would have to eat frugally for a while. We meet Anzu again, still homeless and having to steal to survive. The bartender and others had to chase her, and she couldn't use her powers for fear of Hina discovering her. But a homeless uncle showed her an escape route. He took Anzu to his place and gave her food and temporary shelter. He advised her not to steal anymore and said there were other ways to get food. Anzu wanted to know these other ways, so he showed her how to collect cans or find spare change in vending machines. They spent a whole day collecting cans, and at the end of the day, exhausted, they made it to the scrap metal buyer. But after a whole day, they only made 700 yen. The uncle advised her to buy some alcohol for everyone so they would accept her, as homeless people often help each other. Anzu bought alcohol, and although they didn't accept her at first, they still drank. They wanted Anzu to sing, but she shouted back because it was her alcohol. The uncle gently told her to sing if she knew any songs, so she sang the only song she knew, and although it wasn't good, the homeless people accepted her because she reminded them of their granddaughters. The next morning, while scavenging, Anzu accidentally met Nida again. Seeing that she was still here and not living well, he gave her some money to use. She pridefully threw it away, saying she could earn money herself. But then she realized the people at home were all struggling with money, so she chased after Nida. He had his subordinates stop the car and came out to see what was happening. Understanding that she wanted to ask for money, he gave it to her anyway. Just as Nida left, Anzu was caught by the bartender and the people who had been chasing her. She said she wanted to pay them back, so the bartender calculated the damages and returned the excess money to Anzu. She only had a few coins left, so she returned home sad. But no one blamed her because if they had money, they would just spend it on alcohol anyway. Now we meet Hina's friend Hitomi again, a good and diligent student by day, but a bartender by night. The previous bartender, Yutako, had invited her there and tricked her into wearing this outfit. Hitomi only tried it on, but Yutako took a photo and threatened to send it to the school. However, Hitomi was clever and recorded that she was only trying it on, not actually working. They then reconciled and decided to delete each other's evidence, but Yutako had a copy on her computer, so Hitomi reluctantly had to work there. Her skills were considered by a customer to surpass even Yutako's. Suddenly, Hitomi's teacher and vice principal came here. Hitomi tried to call for help from everyone, saying the teachers were here, but no one paid attention. She was forced to serve them and tried to put on a fake expression so they wouldn't recognize her. The teacher thought she looked quite familiar, but surely it couldn't be possible, right? How could a middle school student be a bartender? But she still looked too similar. The drunk vice principal was chatting on the other side, so the teacher also talked to him. But if one of his students had to work, it would mean losing his job, so the teacher thought he must have been mistaken. The teacher then ordered a drink, and it was extremely delicious. However, Hitomi didn't have calluses on her hands, so she couldn't be a professional. He ordered another drink to see how she would handle it, and it was indeed no taste, no pay. The three people on the other side saw that Hitomi had attracted another customer for the bar. The teacher then took the vice principal home and would return here in the future. Hitomi now had a bank account, and the amount of money in it was growing day by day. That evening, Hina heard Nida talk about meeting Anzu, and he thought maybe he should bring Anzu here and let Hina try being homeless. That night, Hina dreamed about being forced to beg on the streets, so the next morning she decided to change. She gave most of her portion to Nida, and even said goodbye to him when he left for work. She then decided to clean up so that Nida would be happy when he returned. She took out the vacuum cleaner to use, but it ran too far and the cord came loose. She used a broom to clean the cabinet, but broke one of Nida's precious vases. Water spilled on the floor. When she hung towels out to dry, they blew away. She found caviar in the fridge and ate it. At this time, Nida didn't know what was wrong with Hina at home, so he told the boss about it. The boss thought Hina was growing up and advised him to reward her. He had already bought something but hadn't had the chance to give it to her, so he was afraid it might all be spoiled. That evening, Hina was washing dishes when she suddenly had a stomachache, causing all the plates to break. Nida had just returned from buying groceries and witnessed the messy house. He decided straight away that from now on he would no longer take care of Hina. She then packed her things and was kicked out by Nida. Hina tried to apologize, but what good would an apology do? Hina then only had a little money to support herself. She went to eat a meal and ran out of money by the end of the day. Hina met Anzu again, and Anzu took Hina home to stay temporarily. Hina only ate 1 cup of noodles and then went to sleep with Anzu. Because she kept Anzu from sleeping, Hina was wrapped up in a sleeping bag. The next morning, Anzu woke up early to go to work and earn money. When she returned, she found that her cup of noodles had been stolen by Hina. Meanwhile, Hitomi had gone to Nida's house to look for Hina, but he told her that Hina had left with her family. Hitomi later met Yutako again and was pulled in to help distribute charity goods to the homeless. Hina and Anzu came to ask for help, and Yutako didn't understand why Hina was there. She and others later asked Nida, and he said that taking care of Hina was too expensive and he didn't get any benefits. So she said that when raising children, one shouldn't talk about benefits. He couldn't tell them about Hina falling from the sky. They all thought he was denying being Hina's father, so they decided to kick him out. What's more, when Nida left, Yutako even threw salt to exorcise spirits. When he got home, Nida gradually felt very lonely. Anzu, on the other hand, couldn't stand Hina's lazy lifestyle anymore, so she kicked her out too. Hina didn't know what to do to make Nida take her back, so she thought Nida would be happy if she replaced the vase for him. She saw a band performing to earn money, so she approached them to ask a few things. The next morning, Nida went to the park where Yutako had distributed food the other day to look for clues and met Anzu again. She respected Nida for enduring Hina for so long. She was quite smug because she was better at being homeless than Hina. Meanwhile, Hina had used her ability to perform magic tricks to earn money, and that band decided to collaborate with her. Nida heard the news from his subordinate and went to check, discovering that Anzu had used her ability to help that band perform, and they had a very large audience. While they were performing intensely, the police came to disperse them for causing public disorder. The whole group dispersed while Nida still didn't understand what was going on. That evening, Hina and the band talked about going somewhere else to perform, but Hina said she wanted to leave the team because she had enough money. The whole band respected Hina's decision and let her go. Meanwhile, Nida went to Yutako's bar and thought that Hina seemed to be living quite well, but she forbade him from showing his face there if he hadn't brought Hina back yet. After that, he returned home to find Hina waiting at the door. She had bought him a new vase to replace the old one. Although he knew it wouldn't be as valuable as the old vase, seeing that she seemed remorseful, Nida decided to let her return and display the new vase. A few days later, Nida's boss came to the bar and confided in Hitomi. He felt that it was hard for Yakuza to live nowadays. He thought he had said quite a lot, but Hitomi was willing to listen to him pour his heart out. Because out there he could be whoever he wanted, but here he had to be himself. He then left, and Hitomi also served the teacher and then started cleaning up. She went to throw out the trash and was very sleepy when she accidentally encountered Anzu. Seeing that Anzu often collected cans around here, she showed Anzu a place where she could find more cans. She led Anzu to a nearby shop that had quite a lot of discarded cans. She had made a deal with the employee there that she would hide from his boss the fact that he often sneaked out here, so Anzu got those cans. Anzu wanted to repay the favor, so she led Hitomi to follow her. They both went to the park and snuck through to get to where the homeless people lived. An old man saw that it was Anzu's first time having a friend, so he told her to treat her friend well. Anzu offered Hitomi a cup of noodles and boasted about earning 700 yen a day, but Hitomi didn't have the heart to tell her that she earned that much in half an hour. Anzu then invited Hitomi to play, but Hitomi was too tired and fell asleep standing up. A few days later, an old man taught Anzu how to play with strings, so she spent all night learning and the next morning went to show Hina. But Hina preferred playing games, so Anzu got upset and left because she thought Hina didn't have money to play games. The next day, Anzu came back to boast about finding a way to earn more money by selling things like TVs to a buyer, with TVs being considered the most profitable. They then found a pile of old TVs at the foot of a bridge, and Anzu went to get a cart to bring them to the buyer. However, the buyer said these TVs were low quality and only worth 10 yen. So Anzu had to drag Hina to keep looking, and Hina called Hitomi to come help. Anzu only now realized that her two friends knew each other, so all three of them continued searching, but Hina fell asleep in the middle of it. Hitomi then decided to look elsewhere, but she remembered that she had just thrown away an old TV at home, so she went back to get it. She got the TV from home and planned to dump it somewhere to lead Anzu to it, but she was caught by the police who said she couldn't dump a TV there. Seeing Hitomi so worried, the officer thought her parents had forced her to dump it. Hina returned to ask Nida for money to buy a TV. Nida told her where to buy it, and Hina then took a taxi from the store to the buyer. The buyer knew this was new merchandise, and it seemed like Hina was testing him. The taxi driver said Hina hadn't paid yet, so the buyer would pay instead and deduct it from the TV price. Anzu later came and complained about not finding anything, but Hitomi had managed to bring a TV. Hitomi seemed unhappy but still forced a smile. The buyer saw another one in a box, and although he really disliked it, he still suggested they should sell these at a recycling shop. That evening, Anzu had quite a bit of money. She wanted to split it 3 ways and said she needed money to play with Hina. When they got home, Nida asked where the TV was, and Hina said she sold it to pay for the taxi. Nida didn't quite understand the purpose of this and thought Hina was teasing him. A few days later, Hitomi went to work and was discovered by 2 classmates. The teacher later came, and the 2 boys thought Hitomi was dating the teacher. They then called Hitomi's close friend to discuss this matter, and she suggested calling Hina too, but they didn't expect much from Hina. This friend decided to talk to Hitomi to investigate further. When told about being seen in the red light district, Hitomi got flustered and said she was just going to extra classes. The friend mentioned a tutor's name, and Hitomi claimed it was him, so the friend knew Hitomi was lying. After pretending to go to the bathroom to laugh, the friend came back and revealed that the teacher she just mentioned didn't exist. During lunch, when Hitomi was asked about Yutako's bar, she spit out her milk. But the friend was just trying to tease Hitomi by making her flustered. Two male friends realized they couldn't trust the female friend, so they decided to investigate on their own, while Hina still didn't know anything. The two friends wanted to find a time when Hitomi and the teacher were in school. During class, the teacher asked Hitomi to come to the office for something. The two boys followed and decided to burst in, but only saw Hitomi carrying a pile of freshly printed papers. The two young men then had to carry documents along with Hitomi and asked her if she was hiding anything. She was startled and said that what she was doing wasn't bad at all. The two boys really misunderstood and went back to yell at the teacher. The two boys then met with the female friend and Hina and staked out near the bar. They discovered Hitomi going in, and a while later, Nida also went in. So the whole group rushed in thinking Hitomi had fallen into depravity, but what they witnessed was Hitomi working as a bartender. She pretended to be someone else, but none of them were easily fooled. The female friend asked Hitomi if she was really okay, and Hitomi took the bait and confessed. They made her admit that she was a bartender, and everyone didn't know what to say because it was clear that Hitomi was being teased. The teacher later arrived and thought they had all mistaken this Hitomi for the one at school, even though they really looked alike. A few days later, Nida came home from work to find Hina on the phone with his mother, so he had to rush over and grab the phone to explain to his mother. Nida then had to take Hina to his mother's house to introduce her. While paying respects to his deceased father, Nida instructed Hina on what to say. When meeting his mother and sister, Hina was asked about her parents. Since they had only practiced about the father but not the mother, Nida pushed Hina out to play so he could answer himself. He told his mother and sister about how Hina's family had been massacred and he had to take care of her. He made up a sad story about Hina that made his mother and sister sympathize. When Hina returned, the mother and sister made Nida cook, because if the sister cooked, it would just be 3-minute instant noodles. While Nida was cooking, they asked Hina about her life with Nida. She admitted it was fun, but regarding school, she mostly slept and ate lunch. Nida felt that sending Hina to school was indeed a waste of money. When Hina took out her homework, she had written Nida's surname, causing him to rush out to explain. During dinner, they asked Hina what she usually did with Nida, and she said they went to bars, so he had to deny it, saying he only took her because she liked it. The family then let Hina play with leftover summer fireworks. When Hina used the sparklers to chase ants, Nida's sister said each living being has value and shouldn't be treated that way. Yet right after saying that, she poured alcohol on the ants, making Nida think his sister had gone crazy. Nida confided about once kicking Hina out and being misunderstood as kicking his daughter out due to a divorce, causing his mother to become suspicious. He then had to lie, but seeing Hina being questioned about his lies, he decided to change the story and said Hina was his daughter and he had only recently found out. His mother and sister accepted it because Nida seemed serious, so they took Nida and Hina to their father's altar to introduce the new family member. Nida promised to take good care of Hina, and all 3 family members started doing crazy things. A few days later, Yutako and some others protested to protect the homeless because the government decided to demolish all their houses in the park. Anzu didn't know what was happening, so an old man had to explain the situation to her. Yutako had arranged for people to take care of Anzu. That evening, they decided to have a final meal together, and Anzu didn't want to leave everyone, so she stubbornly insisted on protecting their home. But they all opposed Anzu's idea, making the little girl seem sad. However, they had to be cruel to make Anzu willing to leave, and they also blamed themselves for being too useless. The next morning, Anzu and everyone packed up. They decided to go live somewhere else while Anzu went with Yutako. She took Anzu to a couple who owned a restaurant. They would adopt Anzu, so she didn't need to worry too much about survival anymore. During dinner, Anzu cried because only she got to enjoy this while others had to struggle to survive. The couple advised Anzu not to worry too much about that anymore. They knew Anzu still couldn't accept it, so they left it to time to change her. The next morning, Anju woke up early but remembered she didn't have to collect cans anymore. She then saw the couple about to open their shop, so she wanted to help because the uncle had taught her to work for food money. The husband would let her work, as those lessons were valuable and helped Anju grow up. He believed that what she had learned would always be something that kept people by her side, and both of them would teach her many more things. Their lessons would forever remain in her heart, and her image would always be in their hearts, so she didn't need to worry about them feeling lonely. Anju then started her new job there. The couple gave her a uniform and taught her the first lesson. The customer is always right, and when answering older people, she must be polite and respectful. She then had to watch how the wife worked to learn. The husband advised her to memorize the menu, and when Anju saw the expensive ribs dish on the menu, she was shocked because that amount could buy 8 cups of noodles. Nida and his subordinates later came to eat, and he was curious to see her working there. He learned that Anju had been adopted by this place. The husband told Anju that if it's an acquaintance, she should feel free to serve them, so she no longer treated Nida like a god. Nida ordered those expensive ribs, which stunned her because he really had a lot of money. After the meal, Anju learned how to calculate the bill, and seeing so much money made her freeze. Anju then washed the chopsticks, but the husband suggested she throw them away, reminding her of the lesson the uncle had taught about recycling usable things. That night, the wife had to teach Anju how to take a hot bath, and she realized that in this place, she could freely turn on lights and have her own room. The couple was also happy that she felt comfortable there. We meet Hina again, who fell asleep during class and was scolded by the teacher. Hitomi's hand unconsciously drew a demon. Hina complained to Nida at home that school was too boring. Nida couldn't let her drop out, so he wanted her to think of ways to make school more interesting. The class then discussed who would join the student council. No one wanted to, even though being in the student council meant being the school boss. That night, Hina watched movies about bosses and thought being in the student council might be fun. So the next day, she ran for the position, and since no one else intended to participate, the teacher had to let her in. She then told her friends about her intentions for joining the student council, and Hitomi blamed her friend for talking nonsense that made Hina misunderstand. Hina was then assigned by the teacher to write a speech to deliver to the whole school. She went back to class and wrote out her demands instead of a proper speech. The next day, she told Nida about her joining the student council, making him think he wasn't fully awake, so he went to wash his face. When he came out and heard it again, he thought about making a cup of coffee quickly. But Hina wasn't joking and showed him the speech, making him think schools had changed too much. But since Nida was the one who told her to make school more fun, he had to bring the speech to meet the boss, who wanted him to seriously help Hina. So all three called the organization's lawyer, and the boss was very serious about this matter. On the day of the speech, Hina nominated herself for the position of council president and kept saying things the lawyer had written. But because she couldn't distinguish between what needed to be read and what didn't, she read everything, making things quite strange. When the results came, she was assigned to be the secretary. That night, she complained to Nida and also gave up on joining the student council, having dinner with Nida instead. A few days later, a friend informed Hitomi that Hina hadn't attended any student council meetings, so Hitomi had to go instead. She did all the work in the student council perfectly, so when they left, they chose Hitomi as the backup secretary for Hina. Although she didn't want to, she had to join. In the following days, Nida always tried to invite Yutako on dates, but was always rejected. When he got home, he complained to Hina, and she decided to listen to him. He didn't know how cowardly he could be to ask for advice from a kid. Hina then discussed with Hitomi, and she wanted to know what it felt like to have a mother, so Hitomi would help her praise Nida to Yutako. They then went to the shop, and Hina directly told Yutako that she should date Nida. She thought Nida was so cowardly that he sent Hina there to pressure her. But Hitomi thought she should try going because Yutako didn't necessarily need to be at the shop. She felt a bit offended but would still go with Nida so they would both stop bothering her. Hina then told Nida about the date, and he couldn't believe how terrible kids these days were. He thought Hina might be his secret weapon after all. He then hugged Hina and spun her around, causing her to hit her leg on the wall and needing to go to the hospital. He couldn't leave Hina to go on a date, but she wanted him to try his best and bring her back a mother. Nida couldn't let Hina down, so he set off for the date. The date seemed to go smoothly, but in the end, Nida was rejected. He returned home dejected. Hitomi overheard that Yutako's reason for rejecting him was that she saw Nida only thinking about Hina, so she couldn't come between them. She didn't want to get involved with a divorced single father like Nida. Nida returned and brought a puppet to Hina, pretending it was her mother. Hina was speechless at this situation. A few days later, someone from another world was sent to the city and saw that it was still peaceful despite Hina being there. She went to try some food and accidentally met Anju. Anju recognized her as Kei, the leader of the disaster prevention team. Seeing Anju still alive, Anju pulled Kei outside to resolve the matter. She thought Kei came to deal with her, so she was ready for Kei to take action. But Kei didn't care because Anju had been classified as sacrificed during the mission, so it was fine if she didn't return. She gave Anju a report and asked her to check and record Hina's behaviors listed in it, because if Hina lost control, she could destroy an entire city. Obviously, this had happened before, so she was scared and didn't want to die, which is why she assigned Anju to do it instead. She asked how Hina was living now and heard that a human had adopted her, which made Kei wonder how divine Nida must be to be able to control Hina. She then went with Anju to see how Hina was doing. Hina had a broken leg because of Nida, which made Kei really surprised at how divine this Nida could be. They then observed Hina's behaviors. They thought she wouldn't stop at red lights, but she did, willingly paid for things, and greeted others. As for maintaining conversations with others, Hina was also willing to chat with Nida's subordinates, making Kei disbelieve how much Hina could change. She decided to switch to a primary test and see if Hina cared about animals or not, which was rare. They would buy a dog and leave it on the street to see what Hina would do. Hina passed by the dog and went to a nearby shop to get an umbrella. Kei thought she was revealing her true nature, but Hina just took the umbrella to the dog because she understood what being homeless felt like. Anju then made Kei adopt that dog. Kei reviewed the report and found that most answers were positive, proving that Hina had stabilized and could be brought back. One day, Hina used her power to clean up trash, and her classmate Mayumi saw it. Mayumi went home and read stories about these superpowers, and she knew that if she revealed it, she might be silenced, but she still chose to speak out and wrote a letter in case something happened. The next day, she came to ask Hitomi about Hina, thinking it might be better to ask Hina directly. Mayumi then arranged to meet Hina and told her about seeing her use her power. Hina admitted it right away, so Mayumi, fearing she would be silenced, bowed down and begged. But Hina didn't intend to silence anyone, so Mayumi started following Hina to learn the power. Kei saw that Hina now had another friend and wrote it in the report. Mayumi then wanted to try learning the power from Hina because Hina lied that she accidentally awakened it, so Mayumi had hope for herself. But Hina saw that Mayumi was wasting her time and preventing her from going home early, so she reluctantly lifted a rock to make Mayumi think she did it herself so she would go home. The next day, Mayumi thought she could lift more rocks, proving she had mastered it. Hina told her not to use the power when she wasn't around because it had to be kept secret. That night, Mayumi thought she had learned the power, so she didn't need to listen to Hina anymore and decided to show off. The next day, while Hina was sleeping, Mayumi opened a power teaching class and intended to demonstrate it to the whole class. She waved her hands around, but nothing happened, making Mayumi want to find a pair of pants to put on her head to hide her embarrassment. And for the next 2 days, no one saw Mayumi anymore. Hina's leg then healed, and she decided to go eat when Kei came to take her back. Hina didn't like it, so Kei feared she would lose control. But this was an order, so Hina reluctantly obeyed, fearing disobedience would result in being silenced. Kei would take her back after 3 days because she still had to find someone to adopt the dog. She then didn't know how to tell Nida, so she kept hesitating. She followed Nida everywhere, and when he actively asked, he saw her banging her face on the table. Thinking she was sick, he had to take her for a checkup, but everything was fine. He then wanted Hina to speak directly, so she flew up and turned her back to make it easier to say that she was about to return. Nida went inside, put on a shirt, and took her out for a final meal to say goodbye. She wasn't supposed to eat too much fish roe because it's bad for digestion, but they ignored that since it was the last meal. While driving to the meeting point, Nida admitted she only caused him trouble, but without her, he would be quite lonely, and it would be troublesome to explain to everyone. Hina believed he would be fine and left. He then went home and knew Nida had truly grown up, so he recalled memories of when they lived together. But Hina was later asked about the sphere that had encased her when she arrived here, and learned that since Nida had been trapped in it, he had angrily thrown it away, so it was gone. Without it, she couldn't return, so she happily ran back to find Nida because they would continue living together from now on. But when she returned, she discovered Nida celebrating being able to live alone again. He tried to explain, but what was there to explain anymore? Kei then decided to ask someone to bring the sphere, and the person she asked was named Mao. Mao had been dropped somewhere on a deserted island, and a coconut fell and hit the button, causing the sphere to fly into the sea as well. Another one gone without return. Mao had been searching for the sphere for 10 days but couldn't find it, so she knew it was lost for good. She then caught fish to eat and used 2 coconuts and put something on top to make hair, pretending they were Anju and Hina. She had lived with these 2 coconuts for many days and then made herself a makeshift outfit. She then ran into the forest and built a temporary tent. She lived like this with her 2 imaginary friends for many days, and then many months passed. Mao could no longer bear this life. She no longer saw the 2 coconuts as her friends and threw them both away, then created a raft to set sail. She drifted all the way to Cambodia or some country next to Vietnam. We meet Nida again. He and his subordinates had decided to go pick up a new boss who was just released from prison. This boss was very fierce. When Nida had forgotten to light his cigarette before, he got hit on the head with an ashtray. We'll call this boss Boss 2 because Nida has 2 bosses. Nida told his subordinates to be respectful to Boss 2. When they picked him up, Boss 2 heard that the big boss was in a coma because Hina had said he had smelly armpits. Boss 2 wanted Nida to help him become the big boss, but he had already agreed to help Boss 1 because Boss 1 was smart and accepted by the whole gang. Boss 2 didn't like to give in, so he picked up the ashtray to threaten Nida. But Nida bowed his head and said he couldn't let the whole gang fall into chaos, so Boss 2 agreed to be patient for a while. The big boss then heard the news that he had woken up, so Nida came to visit. The big boss seemed to really like Hina, so when he heard about finding a successor, he jokingly said he would make Nida the new big boss. The subordinates reported this news to the 2 bosses, but Nida wanted him to choose seriously, so the subordinates didn't know how to explain to the 2 bosses. Boss 1 said that Nida was using Hina to persuade the big boss to give up his position, which made Boss 2 furious. Both of them trapped Nida in a concrete box and were about to throw him into the sea. He tried to explain, but no one listened. When he asked his subordinates to explain, they just stood there frozen and said nothing. The big boss had to come and explain to them that Nida didn't want to steal the big boss position but was only thinking about the gang, which made them realize they had misunderstood Nida, so they decided to promote him as an apology. He was depressed, not knowing how to handle this situation, but everyone else just stood there clapping. Hina then came to inform Yutako about Nida being quite depressed, so they thought they should throw him a promotion party. She then researched how to throw a party. She decided to ask for advice from everyone. Friends told her to give a photo, some said to give flowers, some said to give alcohol, some said to give his favorite food, some said to make it a surprise. Anju advised her to bring Nida to this restaurant, but she refused immediately. After thinking for a while, Hina will combine all the opinions. She then tells Nida to notify her in advance when he's coming home so she can prepare a party. She then grabs a photo and starts cleaning the house. She goes out to buy necessary items except for alcohol because they don't sell it. So she returns home, puts water into empty bottles as a fake, adds salt and places candles on top to fake a cake, and puts fish eggs on top for food. Nida thinks it's nice to have a surprise party once in a while, so when he comes home, he gives Hina a 1-hour notice to prepare. When he enters the house, he's shocked to see the party looking like an altar, with rosary beads, salt, and candles, plus a memorial photo and boxes that look like coffins. The melon he just bought completes the offering set. Hina then emerges from a box, thinking he'll be surprised, but there's a hiccup. However, Nida still thanks her for her thoughtfulness. One day, Hitomi returns home from work to find her mother waiting. Her mother wants to know where she's been. Hitomi says she stayed at a friend's house, but her mother doesn't believe her, so she mentions her bartending job. Her mother doesn't believe this either and thinks she's selling her body. Hitomi then complains about this to Yutako, who suggests Hitomi should run away from home as she did in the past. The difference is that Hitomi now has money to live independently. Originally, Yutako wanted Hitomi to continue working here to earn money. Nida feels a bit regretful for loving someone as money-hungry as Yutako. Yutako then takes Hitomi to a fully furnished and luxurious apartment. The price is a bit steep, but Nida has helped negotiate so Hitomi only needs to pay half. Still, it's too expensive, but Yutako forces Hitomi to sign. Nida thinks she's worse than the Yakuza. Hitomi then faces financial problems. A customer wants to introduce her to a new job, which is cleaning windows on high-rise buildings. She's a bit scared, so she tries to work quickly. Then other people come to give her more and more jobs. She has to go from one job to another, leaving her with almost no free time. While working at a company, other employees gather to badmouth Hitomi, saying her young face must have seduced the bosses to get promotions. At school, Hitomi sees her schedule is packed, and she has no time to study or rest. She falls asleep in class, so her friends come to check on her. She can't tell them what's going on. At work, Hitomi decides to improve her relationships with those who badmouth her, which seems to work. Those who spoke ill of her realize she's really trying hard and want her to keep it up. That night, her mother calls Hitomi again, but she says she's moved out and hangs up. She then goes home and falls asleep right at the door. In the morning, she sees the food is still out and not put away, and it's already time for work, leaving Hitomi completely helpless. At the bar, Yutako and everyone want to throw a housewarming party for her. Hitomi can't learn to say no, so when she gets home, she decides to invite her mother to attend, hoping her mother will handle it for her. When her mother arrives at the party, she's shocked to see all the important people. Hitomi had hoped her mother would refuse on her behalf by saying she's still a student, but after meeting the big shots from large companies, her mother is shocked. They all praise Hitomi and are ready to hire her without an interview. Hitomi still believes in her mother, but her mother agrees to let Hitomi work. The mother and daughter then have to talk, and the mother no longer wants to forbid Hitomi from working, as it seems to be her own wish. Yutako sees this as good news and runs to invite Hitomi to celebrate. Hitomi then doesn't even know what she's really trying hard for anymore. We meet Anju again. She has received her first month's salary after working here. Her aunt and uncle want Anju to buy whatever she wants. Since it's her first time having a large sum of money, Anju goes to show off to Hitomi. Hitomi pretends to be shocked to make Anju happy. She then takes Anju to fun places like bowling and karaoke, but Anju doesn't like any of them. So they both go shopping. Anju sees people wrapping gifts and decides to buy presents for her aunt and uncle. She buys a massage machine because they've been having shoulder pain lately, but Anju doesn't have enough money. Hitomi offers to chip in, but Nida's subordinate is there and says that gifts should be bought with one's own money to be meaningful. So he takes Anju and Hitomi to the horse races to place bets. Hitomi doesn't like this at all, but Anju is easily persuaded to join. She bets on the least likely horse to win, and when it races, it ends up winning, so she gets a large sum of money. There's also a horse with a broken leg, and the people sitting behind say it will definitely be taken away for slaughter. Anju has now become like any other gambler, wanting to eat more after winning, so she continues to bet and then loses heavily. She decides she must multiply her remaining money by 20 times. She bets on the horse that started running last, intending to use her power to force it to run faster. But she's afraid it might break its leg and be slaughtered too. She's forced to choose between the aunt and uncle and the horse, and she couldn't bear to let the horse be slaughtered. Anju is officially broke. Hitomi advised her to focus on the meaning of the gift rather than its material value. So that evening, Anju gave the aunt and uncle free massage tickets. The uncle used it right away and felt it had been a long time since someone had massaged his shoulders, while the aunt wanted to keep it. Some time before, a newspaper had planned to interview modern-day Yakuza, and Nida was chosen as the subject because he had single-handedly wiped out a gang and become legendary. The chosen reporter was named Seta, and he decided to risk his life for work, writing his will before going to the interview. When meeting Nida, Seta didn't know he was hiding a beast inside. Nida advised him not to interview him, but Seta couldn't back out anymore, so Nida allowed Seta to record his life process. He then brought Hina along because she still had a broken leg at the time. They asked about the reason Nida got involved with the Yakuza, and it was simply that he accidentally got involved and then followed because he saw that this job had a lot of money, and also because his father died early. He wanted to find someone to be loyal to. As for Hina, she's not his daughter, but just someone he's fostering. Regarding being very attractive to women, it's all fake because the ones he likes are never normal. Seta thought Nida seemed like a normal good person, so he followed him home and recorded his life with Hina at home, which was quite normal like any other father and child. Seta increasingly suspected that he was hiding his true nature. Later, they went to find Nida's mother and sister, but they straightforwardly said Nida was a good person and not violent at all. So Seta dragged him to Nida's organization to film him while working there. Boss 1 let him interview right away. Nida then asked his subordinates if they had prepared a gift for the old boss, but the subordinate forgot, so he let it slide. Seta wanted him to hit the subordinate for making a mistake, but he thought scolding that idiot would be worse than hitting him. They thought he was making the Yakuza's image look weak, so they made him act. The subordinate also wanted him to toughen up and use this ashtray to hit him on the head. So he had to act like boss 2 and actually hit him on the head with the ashtray. After that, they cut the scene, and the subordinate felt Nida hit a bit too hard. Seta then continued to follow Nida and realized he really was just a normal good person. Seta wanted Nida to stage himself to look truly brutal, but Nida thought that if it's an interview, they should show people the real face. Seta still tried to provoke him, but Nida didn't care. Seta then went home, saw his family, and decided he couldn't let this mission fail. So Seta started to stage Nida's life inaccurately. When Nida watched the interview of himself, Seta had turned him into a cold-blooded and violent person, ready to hit subordinates when they make mistakes, with a difficult childhood due to losing his father early, and famous for violence, single-handedly purging an entire Yakuza gang, making the boss fear him by showing attitude. Seta thought it wasn't like a loyal Yakuza as before. Moreover, he's living with a little girl who only knows how to follow Nida's orders and has a broken leg, presumably from disobeying. The little girl always claims to be Nida's daughter, but Nida denies it. When asked what he would do to those who get in his way, he said he would massacre them all. At the end of the report, when they wanted to pay, they were forced to pay 10 times more. Nida was speechless about this report. When he came to the organization, he was taunted by the two bosses. They didn't care even when he said it was staged. In fact, they had kept the original tape but wanted to force Nida to go deeper into the darkness. A few days later, Hina had gone to learn skiing, so Nida had to look after Anju. He didn't know why Anju didn't go with the aunt and uncle to the hot springs, but she wanted to let both of them have a private vacation. He didn't know how much he had to pay to bring Anju here instead of Hina. After that, he made food and Anju brought it to the table. After eating, she voluntarily took the dishes to wash, making him feel that looking after Anju was easier than he thought. He then taught her to clean windows, and she was amazed at his vegetable cutting speed. Anju then helped him with everything, making him feel jealous of the aunt and uncle for having such a sweet Anju. But he remembered Anju was very violent when she first arrived. It was the living environment that changed Anju, so he decided to let Anju experience life like Hina's to remember her true nature. Nida then took Anju out to play. He really hoped she would return to her former self so that the aunt and uncle would see how difficult it is to raise a child. He took Anju to the aquarium and tried to be less gentle with her, but she didn't mind and just smiled happily. When they went bowling, Anju was also very cheerful. By the afternoon, he thought Anju should find a place where she could be selfishly happy, but she preferred to have fun with Nida. This made him realize he was wrong to try to drag Anju down to hell, and now he was the one being pulled up to heaven by Anju. He played together with Anju and understood that this is the life of a real father. The next day, Anju went home because the aunt and uncle had returned. He realized he had been so busy enjoying himself that he forgot reality was about to return. Suddenly, the teacher called to inform that Hina was lost in the mountains while skiing. Hina and Hitomi, along with two friends, had to gather snow to make a shelter for survival. Hina only felt bad because they were lost without food. Anju wanted all three to limit their energy use. Hina asked what would happen if they weren't found, and the answer was certainly death. She then suddenly went to the bathroom. The three friends waited for a long time and didn't see Hina return, so they were worried, but just as they mentioned it, she came back. She said she found a light, so all three ran out to see but found nothing. Hina decided not to leave them behind, so she wanted them to hide the fact that she had powers. Everyone thought she was too hungry and hallucinating, so she went outside. The three chased after her and saw her flying, and they still thought they were seeing things, but she made Hitomi fly too, so everyone believed. However, now Hina couldn't use her power because she was too hungry. She woke up the next morning and still couldn't use her power, so Hitomi led her to where the two friends were and closed her eyes. They had laid out an imaginary feast for Hina and used snow to make rice rolls. She knew full well this was snow and couldn't change anything. Hitomi had to try to pretend along, but Hina wanted them to stop and said she would try to use her power. But right at this moment, the rescue helicopter found the group. They saw the group had made a plate of rice rolls out of snow in the middle of the forest, but they just rescued them first. At the hospital, Hina complained to Nida that she wanted to eat real food, not fake food made of snow. The life of Nida and others continued as usual after that. A few years later, we meet again the blonde guy from the band that Hina once joined. He had gone to China and met Mao there. Remember the girl who was dropped on a deserted island? Here, Mao was in China and practicing Qigong performances for a Shaolin temple. The blonde guy had come to meet her hoping to learn that Qigong to perform back home, but was pulled away by a monk. Mao then returned to her room and continued talking with two friends, but this time they were made of wood. She remembered when she drifted to a poor country and took a ship to come here. The monks saw that she seemed to know Japanese, and there was also that blonde Japanese guy, so they had to keep watch and not let Mao go anywhere, because she was the temple's source of income. Mao then went to eat and accidentally met the blonde guy again. He wanted to learn her Qigong to serve the band because he had promised Hina. Hearing about Hina, she showed the blonde guy if it looked like this puppet, and he admitted it was correct, making her feel she had a clue to find her friend again. But the monks wouldn't let her go. She had to run away with the blonde guy and was chased by the monks. She used fake kung fu to defeat them, but reinforcements arrived. She then had to throw the blonde guy at them, but without hurting him. The master then came and asked her what she wanted to do, and she said she wanted to go to Japan. She had helped this place make money, so it could be seen as having paid off her debt for him taking her in. He wanted her to pass the final test before letting her go. She had to fight a machine that spun at extremely high speeds, even able to grind stones. So she accepted the challenge and stopped 2 metal bars before they touched her hands and feet. She launched a palm strike to destroy the machine and was approved to go to Japan. She then was able to report to Kei that she had lost the sphere and was about to meet Hina and Anju again, and the movie ends here.